Hello folks, it is I, Trevor from Media Mementos, and boy do I have a story for you today. As promised, we're going to be talking about the good teachers of Moralton High. But first, a disclaimer. Despite Moralton High being, let's be real, evil, they actually had quite a few good teachers. I've kind of divided it like this. Half the teachers, 50%, just fine, but they can't really be made into stories, you know? There's not much you can go off of with, this teacher was nice, this teacher actually knew what they were doing. As much as it's kind of sad to say that was a kind of rarity at Moralton High, like I said, only 50%, and that's what's supposed to be the standard. I'm sorry guys, I can't really talk about you, but I can talk about the other 50, which 45% of that 50 were the evil teachers that I've been talking about, like Miss Tuttle or the upcoming Miss Frabblehouse. But then there were the 5% that really made things tolerable, and I'm going to be talking about the best ones today. First, Mr. Grundus. Mr. Grundus was the PE teacher. He weighed about 300 pounds and did absolutely no physical things whatsoever. The reason is because he had a spinal injury. He wasn't wheelchair bound or anything, but he wasn't really mobile, let's just say. And I know it sounds crazy, physically disabled PE teacher. Well, hey, we also had a colorblind art teacher. There was that too. Yeah, we always like to joke that they could afford to paint the rails of the railing on the outside of the school or get some kind of brand spanking new sports stadium, but they can't get history textbooks that weren't published in 1988 or 89. One of those. And yeah, Mr. Grundus, despite the fact that he wasn't really fit for the job, he really gave it his all. The man knew how to make sports and running and whatever entertaining. He made up his own games and he would have us play them instead of doing things like, basketball or badminton. He'd still have occasional units like that because it was required. But for the most part, he just kind of played by his own rules. He also had a wicked mouth. He wouldn't curse, that'd get him fired, probably. But this guy, you give him 1 ounce of sass, he gives you a whole heaping metric ton right back at you. He would take lip from no one. Gruff? Yeah. A little intimidating to freshmen? Definitely. Good guy? Oh yeah. I miss Mr. Grundus. He got married, I think, shortly before I graduated, and it seems like, from what I can tell, he and his wife are doing well. So to the Grunduses, wishing you the best. And now for Mr. 1 and Mr. 2. They're identical twin brothers with different last names, for the sake of this only. Obviously they had the same name in real life. Mr. 1 was a history teacher and Mr. 2 was a science teacher. And they both had the same styles, being, hey, school's boring, so why don't we fix it? It's like if Miss Frizzle was a comedian. Especially with Mr. 1. Mr. 2 was still cool and all, but I didn't have him very much. I mostly had Miss Tuttle, which was not the best. But as for Mr. 1, he had a very important job in Moralton High. Indoctrination class. I'm not talking about religious, because obviously, like I've been saying multiple times, I'm still a Christian and proud of it. Especially when you're going to a Christian school, I wouldn't really call that indoctrination, you know? But what I would call indoctrination is this. It was a current issues class where they would, at least in theory, teach you the events of today from a far-right perspective. I'm not talking about regular Republican. I'm talking about as far-right as you can go kind of thing. But he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do it. He was trusted with the job, but he let Moralton High down year after year because he would actually, get this, teach us the current issues and let us think for ourselves. Ridiculous. That'd never work. But sure enough, it did. And he always made jokes. He put on videos, and sometimes they weren't even related to the subject. He just wanted to fill up time. He really knew how to keep us entertained. And so did Mr. 2. He did a lot of the same things with his subject. But, all good things must come to an end. Mr. 2... I did this for some reason. Mr. 2 ended up leaving for another school. Take us with you! But it seems like it worked out well for him, and last I heard, he's doing just fine, and so is his brother. But those teachers are nothing compared to the next great ones we've got. The last three, these ones are really something special. Let's start with, well, I was gonna call him Mr. Dumbledore, but I don't want to steal that name, so let's mix Gandalf and Dumbledore, and he's Mr. Gambledore. This guy knew everything. Give him a trick question, give him a really obscure fact or trivia thing to answer, he doesn't even have to blink. The man was indescribable. It really was like Dumbledore and Gandalf were merged together and were real, and also talked like this, kind of like Correcchio from Danganronpa, but much more stoic and well-read. The man was great. We always had a joke that he was Batman secretly because he was the most even-tempered, mild-mannered guy in the world. So of course he's Batman. You knew he was special as soon as you walked into his room. Firstly, it was decorated with Russian Orthodox stuff. I don't know why he was going to Moralton High and he was Russian Orthodox, but you know what? I don't care. He made it interesting. He taught us, despite being a math teacher, all about world religions and world cultures, especially Russia. He was a big Russia fan. Not the government, just the culture. And my favorite thing that he did was, at the entrance of his classroom, he had this giant whiteboard where he had all the years of every single year that Morrilton High had been in business or in production or whatever you want to call it. And next to it was one alumni from every graduating class, and he would change it every day. And it would be a little prayer board that apparently he would come to school early and he'd go to that prayer board, write everyone's names out and pray for them individually. I mean, even if you're not a religious person, you gotta admit, that guy's got a real big heart. And as much as I couldn't stand Morrilton High and I couldn't stand math, I hate math, I had to be in his class. The guy was just so endearing, and he made you feel good about yourself even when you weren't doing well in the subject. Take it from me. I was getting straight A's in just about everything, but math was rough. But did he ever make me feel bad about myself? No. He kept encouraging me the whole way, telling me interesting facts, and taking the time to get to know me. He's probably the teacher I think second most about. There's one that I'm saving for the end that I think about the most. But in the meantime, let's talk about Mr. Autumn. Mr. Autumn was a history teacher who was a lot like the PE teacher I mentioned earlier. A lot of sass and wouldn't take crap from anybody. But what I want to mention that this guy did, I really want to say the name of this organization because it's so good. And I want people to donate to it and support it and all that, but I don't want to dox him. And by telling that information, you would be able to find Morrilton High really easy. So yeah, not doing that. But he had this summer camp up for underprivileged and abused children, mostly in the foster system, but also ones that had a Child Protective Services history. They'd be invited to this camp for 2 weeks that he helped set up himself. They'd have musical guests, rock climbing, laser tag, wilderness exploring. They learned how to build campfires, sing-alongs, all meals provided. It sounded like a fantastic experience for those kids. Because remember, they're coming from homes where if they're treated like anything else, it's garbage. And he'd always say in our chapels that we'd have every week, he'd do these testimonies to kind of get some students to volunteer. And I was going to do it once, but I don't remember why. It didn't end up happening. But he would explain it as this. You know, they'd come to the camp, they wouldn't be trusting of anybody because of what they've been through. They'd want to keep their distance. But then over time, they'd let their guards down, they'd start having fun, they'd get really close to the counselors, and at the end, they'd never want to leave. Even now, it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside, you know? It's just such a feel-good thing, and it wasn't something that the school sanctioned. It was the other way around. He started it, they caught wind of it, and they're like, I want a piece of that. And that's how that got started. They helped give him some of the funding to get started, and he's been getting tons of donations ever since. And I think he's still doing it. So, Mr. Autumn, if you're out there and you see this video, keep doing what you're doing. You're really making a difference for those kids. But None of these teachers, not even Mr. Gambledore or Mr. Autumn, can compare to my favorite teacher I've ever had, Mr. Pyre, P-Y-R-E. Not his real name again, everyone's got a fake name. Mr. Pyre, I owe him so much. He was actually my 6th grade teacher. 6th grade science, history, and Bible. Can you tell the school was short-staffed? Despite being a teacher and a student, we were thick as thieves. Of course, we never met outside of school. That'd be really weird. Well, he did go to my grad party, so I guess there's that. But the man, he was like everything you want in a teacher. Think of if Miss Frizzle was in real life. I know I mentioned the Frizzle comparison already, but this is even more apt. He was fantastic. But why am I mentioning him here in high school? One of the things you could do in senior year was have a TA class. You would kind of sit in a class, waste your time, maybe grade some easy assignments. I was in the elementary school office. That wasn't great because I had 2 people overseeing me. One was actually the mom of one of my classmates, and she was great. The other was a Karen. The elementary school was here, let's just say on the map of the school, and the high school was here. So they're on completely opposite ends, and she kept forgetting that. I had to remind her I need to leave like 10 minutes early if I want to get to my class on time, because remember, my class is not only in the high school building, but it's tucked all the way in the back. She wouldn't listen. In fact, we had several blow-ups over this because she would not let me leave, I kept being late, and there was a whole bunch of trouble no matter what I would do. So I reconnected with Mr. Pyre and I told him about what was going on, and he said, request meet for next semester, I'll get you in. And he did. Most of the time I didn't even do anything, I just sat in his class and did homework. And he signed off on it because he knew I was struggling in that bad environment over there and he wanted me out. He didn't even need a TA. All he wanted to do was see me happy, and I appreciate it. In fact, one of my favorite things that he ever did for me was back when the show that I'm working on, Dorland Misadventures, was called Standard Misadventures, he got so excited about that he had me give a whole presentation in front of his class to show it off and prepare it, and they loved the sound of it. And for those of you who are curious, wait a few more months. We're finishing up with the pilot's final draft script, and then it's on to art. I can't tell you how thankful I am for this guy. So supportive, so fun, really makes you feel good about yourself. Mr. Pyre, thank you for everything. You know how great this guy was too? He was so done with Morrilton High's crap that he was ready to retire. But it seems like, I never got confirmation of this, but he kind of stuck around until I left. Which is weird because we didn't really talk much when I was in high school. Every so often we'd bump into each other in the middle school buildings. But right after I graduated, out. And from the sounds of it, it was kind of a quick decision, just a couple of months. But I did hear from him, though, that the administration of Moralton High was getting worse. After I left, things went down. I'm still not sure what exactly happened or what the specifics were, but I do have some friends that have younger siblings that go there, and yeah, from the vague stories I've heard, it's gotten worse. And sad to say, out of all those teachers that I spoke really highly of, only a couple are left. All I know for sure is that Mr. One and Mr. Gambledore are still there. I'm not sure about Mr. Autumn. Or, really, actually, any of the teachers, now that I think of it. All I can think of is, Frabble House. And, yeah, just Frabble House and Mr. Gambledore. That's kind of all I can think of that's actually still there. Oh, and I actually just realized I called, Ms. Frabble House my arch nemesis. That's not true. So she was my second arch nemesis, I'd say. My real arch nemesis is the one we're going to talk about next time. Next time we're talking about Mrs. Scattergat. Mrs. Scattergat, something else. So yeah, I have to correct it that Miss Frabblehouse wasn't married, Mrs. Scattergat was. Mrs. Scattergat is one of the worst people I have ever met in my life. I don't like to say I hate people, but she is really close. For the psychological damage she put to me, that still lingers to this day, the kinds of nasty, terrible things she'd do, the hypocrisy, the school career ruining crap. I'm already going to tell you that her thumbnail for next video, it's going to be Clay. She's the Clay of Moralton High. You ready for this? Trust me, I won't make you wait that much longer. But until then, what'd you think of this video? Who sounds like the best teacher? Comment below and let me know. Alright folks, thanks for watching this episode of Moralton High. See you guys next time.